This conference will now be recorded.
Good evening and welcome to the December 28th, 2023 Board of Commissioners special meeting. I'd like to call this meeting to order. We have all commissioners present this evening. I would ask you all to please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'd like to announce that all public sessions of the South Whitehall Township Board of Commissioners are electronically recorded, filed, and posted to the Township website for public access. At this time, I'd like to ask our Township Manager, Tom Petrucci, to please review our public virtual meeting rules.
Thank you. The public virtual meeting rules are as follows. Courtesy of the floor for non-agenda items will be at the end of the agenda. Public comment will be limited to 5 minutes per speaker. For all listed agenda items that require official action, the board president will call for courtesy of the floor prior to the Board of Commissioners taking action on that specific agenda item. For this evening's meeting, where interviews are being conducted, no action is being taken when the interviews are conducted. And we would ask that the members of the public please, do not participate in asking questions of the candidates. For in-person attendees, please raise your hand to be recognized, then move to the podium when directed. You will be asked to state your name and address for the record and may then proceed with asking your question. For those participating virtually, please mute your microphone or telephone to avoid any background noise that may cause interference during the meeting. The chat box feature will be active throughout the meeting. If you have a comment or question, please type your full name and address into the chat box. The staff member monitoring GoToMeeting will then unmute your microphone and you will have the opportunity to comment or ask a question. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. At this time, I'd like to welcome Commissioner-elect Tommy Johns to our meeting. I understand you wanted to make a comment this evening? If you'd like to speak, if you would please into the microphone. The reason being we have people online and they can't hear in this room unless you're at a microphone.
Okay. Yeah, my name is Tommy Johns. The commissioner as of next week. I'm asking the board not to make a decision tonight. I'd like to be more involved in this with like a round table, if we could all sit together on it after tonight's meeting. And I'd like to see it listed, advertised for another couple of days because of the holidays. I feel a couple people missed it. I know we got a lot of good candidates, but I just, to give the citizens of South Whitehall who didn't see it that were away another chance to apply. And that's all I have to say. That's all I'm asking for.
Okay, thank you for your comment.
Thank you.
Moving on to agenda item 4, we're going to begin our interviews of candidates for commissioner. And before we begin, I would like to ask our township manager to review some of the background information regarding tonight's meeting and the process based on first class township code for vacancy.
Thank you. So the first class township code, section 530, provides that the Board of Commissioners has 30 days to appoint a successor when the vacancy occurs in the elected office of commissioner due to termination of residency from the township. So in this case, former Commissioner David M. Kennedy terminated his residency on Thursday, November 30th of this year. That 30-day time period runs through Saturday, December 30th. So that means tonight's meeting, which is a special meeting, would be the last meeting in which the board could take action as the board, solely the board, to appoint a successor to that position. So tonight's meeting was advertised in accordance with the Sunshine Act in the December 27th issue of the Lehigh Valley Press. The purpose of the meeting tonight is to interview candidates for the vacant position of Township Commissioner, to consider the appointment by resolution of a successor to fill the vacancy in the position of Township Commissioner, and to consider any other business which may become before the Board of Commissioners. Following wide dissemination of the availability of the applications, for the current commissioner vacancy, the township utilized social media for its own Facebook and Instagram and Nextdoor sites, as well as the township website, Morning Call Online, and the Lehigh Valley News Online, the township has received a total of 8 applications for the vacancy. So we've scheduled 15-minute time slots with a 10-minute window in between each one. So running from 6 o'clock through till 9:10 this evening, or 9:20 this evening, I'm sorry. So each candidate will have 15 minutes, and then the board will have the time to ask questions. Should the board not appoint tonight, this matter would go to the vacancy board, so which would give the board an additional 15 days to fill the vacancy from the December 30th deadline, which would put the board at Sunday, January 14th, 2024. The vacancy board consists of one chairperson, who is Mr. David Torrey, and the rest of the Board of Commissioners. So the vacancy board would have to convene in a special meeting as well with a separately advertised notice and agenda in order to select a successor. If the board, for whatever reason, does not make an appointment in conjunction with the vacancy board by the January 14th, 2024 deadline, the matter then heads to the Court of Common Pleas. The vacancies would need to be filled upon presentation of a petition signed by not less than 15 registered electors of the township. I believe that covers everything for this evening.
Excellent. Thank you, Tom. Well, we will move on to our first candidate this evening. Our first candidate will be participating virtually on GoToMeeting, and it is Mr. Manjeet Walla. Can you hear me, sir?
Yes.
Very good. Welcome. Thank you very much for your interest in the vacant Township Commissioner position. Before we begin, would you please introduce yourself to our board and also tell us why you are interested in this vacancy?
Okay. As you said, my Manjeet is Manjeet Walla. My name is Manjeet Walla, and I was a entrepreneur, owned the gas stations, multiple gas stations, and then last year I decided to retire myself. And I really like to do the community services and do some, service for the township, basically. Spend more time in the community. That's my main motive, is to coming in into the townships as a commissioner. So if you have any other question, you can ask me, but that's what it is about me.
Very good. Thank you. I'll open it up to the board to begin questions.
Good evening, Mr. Walla. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. My first question is, do you regularly attend meetings, or do you attend any meetings? And if so, which ones?
No, I do not. I did not attend any meeting yet.
Okay.
But I
What is
will.
your, I'm sorry, go ahead.
But I will attend regularly.
Okay, my second question is, what is your impression of what a commissioner does? What do you feel our role is? And what motivated you to apply for this position? I realize you gave a little of that in your introduction, but what is your impression of what we do?
Well, basically my interest, as I told you, that in the local politics and the local community services, that is the main my focus is. So I can use my free time. I just took a little early retirement. So that's why in my school, I have studied political science, and then I really enjoy to work with the local government.
Thank you.
Mr. Wall, I do have one question to get started here. In your view, what is the difference between the role of a commissioner and the role of the township manager?
Well, the role of commissioner is basically to bring all the agendas, attend all the meetings, and see what are the benefits for the citizen, and which is in the rules and regulation of the township. And then manager, basically, he handled it, all the minutes, the meetings, and then he implemented the rules and laws.
Mr. Wall, I had a question also. Is there a specific pressing concern that you feel there's here in South Whitehall? And if you could share that with us, and then how would you contribute, or in what way would you contribute to improve it?
I have a free time and knowledge, as I told you. So as my study, political science, I really want to use it now, which I never used in previously because of early retirement. I have a free time, and just put all my efforts to this to do the best off to the township. But
Thank you. Commissioner Osborne, did you have a
Thank you, President Kelly. Yeah, so my questions that I have prepared actually have been asked by others, but let me just piggyback a little bit on President Kelly's question and maybe rephrase it. So, Mr. Walla, I didn't hear that you have a concern which motivated you to run for commissioner, but what might be your one or two top priorities, even if they're not a concern, if you were selected?
okay, actually, I do not have any concerns right now. But as I told you, that I just it is my interest from my own mind that I just need to get into the local community services. Otherwise, I do not have any concern, basically, if you want to ask me that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I do have another question. I'm going to give you a scenario.
Okay.
Imagine you are part of the board and you're sitting up here. There are multiple views and there is no consensus.
Okay.
A decision must be made. How would you handle that?
Okay. So could you repeat the question one more time?
Sure. You are a commissioner on the board and there's no consensus. Basically, I'm saying the commissioners can't agree and a decision must be made. How would you handle this?
How I will handle this?
Mhm.
Well, as any case should be decided on the base of the facts and within the boundaries of the local laws and all the government laws. And if it's in the benefit of the citizen, I will try to pass it.
Thank you.
Mr. Well, I have one more question for you. Based on your knowledge and experience as a commissioner candidate and as a resident of the township, are there any strengths or weaknesses that you see with respect to the township's current financial position?
I have not reviewed actually thoroughly, so I cannot comment on it.
Thank you.
Without reviewing anything and doing comments will be ignorance.
Mr. Wall, I have a question. You mentioned earlier your work as an entrepreneur. I'm wondering if you could share with us what lessons learned or experiences you had in that role that might have prepared you to be a commissioner. How would you apply your experience if you were to be appointed for this role?
Okay, because as an entrepreneur, I had a pleasure uh, to deal with like more than 20 employees and establish the relation between the customers and trained to employees. Uh, so basically, this is the same concept, as a township, any local or the government bodies, their main duty is to see that the interest of the people and do the best according to whatever the laws within the law limits. And that's I had experience in my business that to establish the relation between the community, between the customer and myself and my employees, to train all my employees.
Thank you. Commissioner Osborne, did you have another
No further
question?
questions. Thank you. No further questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
I do have one more question. You mentioned in your application that you've always volunteered in the community. Are there any particular organizations or causes that you have volunteered for that have meant a lot to you? And if so, why?
Uh, Not any particular community, originally my background is I'm from India originally, and we have some temples over here, and then I go over there. Plus, uh, very often I go to the homeless places and serve over there too.
Thank you.
You
I have no more questions.
Mr. Wall, I have one last question. I was just curious how long you have lived in South Whitehall?
Since 2002 or one, I think, since 2001.
2001. And would you share with us your view of the quality of life here in South Whitehall?
Well, I can tell you in one word that since I moved, and actually used to live in Bethlehem before, then I moved into this township. Uh, I bought this gas station on Syracuse Boulevard in 22, and then I used to live in very small townhouses. And since then, I try to move out. I had a business all over in different states, and I have to go. And a couple of times I decided to move, but my children and my wife said that we're not going to move from here. That's how much I can say we like the township.
Thank you. And one last question for me. How did you learn about the vacancy for the commissioner?
I think I got a text message from the township.
Oh, very good. So you're signed up for the Nixle. Excellent.
Yes.
I'm very happy to hear that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Are there any more questions from any of the commissioners at this point? Did you have anything to add?
The only question I have is procedural in nature. If you were appointed to the position, would you be willing to take the oath of office and fill out a statement of financial interest form?
Yes, I will.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Mr. Walla, thank you very much for
Thank you.
spending time with us this evening and answering our questions.
My pleasure.
And we will be in touch whether or not we make a decision tonight or if we convene the vacancy board. Those are the options that we have. We will certainly be in touch when one of those decisions is made.
All right. Thank you. I'll
Very
wait for
good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Should I leave it now?
Yeah, I mean, you're welcome to stay on if you'd like to listen to other interviews, but as far as this board's time with you, we are done with your interview portion.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Do we know if the next applicant is here?
Is the board ready for Mr. Sullivan?
Are we all ready? Yes, we are. Thank you, Tom.
Good evening.
Good evening, James, and welcome.
Thank you.
Before we get started, I would just want to thank you for your interest and your application for the vacant commissioner position. Before we get started with questions from the board, I would just give you a moment to please introduce yourself to us and tell us why you have an interest in this vacancy.
Okay, I've lived in the Lehigh Valley in northern Bucks County for about almost 20 years now. I originally worked in New York, was transferred into a position at Cellular One of Allentown right here in Whitehall. I was transferred and given a promotion to work there, so therefore I moved into Bucks County. About 5 years ago, I moved from Bucks County into South Whitehall Township. Main reason why I moved here is my two previous employers before I retired were based here in South Whitehall. I get tired of the commute. So hence I'm here. When I lived in New York, I was extremely active in a lot of volunteer groups. I also served as the vice chairman of the Orange County Planning Board. When I transferred here, for the first few years I lived in Bucks County, I was doing a lot of traveling and I just didn't have the time to devote to all the volunteer work I was doing in New York. And since my retirement in October 2021, I've been looking to do something to get back into it.
Very good. Thank you very much. I will open it up to the board to begin questions.
Mr. Sullivan, welcome. Thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you.
I have a question for you. Do you regularly attend meetings? Have you attended any meetings in South Whitehall?
None since I've been here now.
And I noticed that you are, like you said, you were part of the Orange County Planning Board. Do you have any additional certifications as a planner?
No. The role of the county planning board is we oversaw development along county roads and highways in Orange County. At the time when I was a vice chairman, our biggest issue was the county landfill, which was owned by the county. Unlike Lehigh County, Northampton County, all the municipalities had their own sanitation departments, and they were using the county landfill to dump their solid waste at. We were faced with a cease and desist order by the EPA because the landfill was starting to leach into a river that was about a half mile away. So most of the time that I was on the board, we were dealing with looking for alternatives to the landfill. We were looking at things we could do to cap part of it. We expanded part of it. And unfortunately, we started trucking our waste into Pennsylvania, unfortunately.
And I do have another question.
Sure.
What is your impression of what a commissioner does? What do you feel our duties are? What's your impression?
Well, I think my main concern, that I think a commissioner would have too, is looking at long-term in the township. And basically, I view commercial and residential development as a keystone for a township this size, because everything that happens on that end has a direct impact on services, township-owned infrastructure, and overall quality of life, as well as taxes. So I would view a large part of that as looking into the future, saying, what can we do to help manage that development process, all right, to make sure that we're satisfying everything behind it.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. I do have a couple of questions, and I'll start off with two. The first, and you may have experience in Orange County, New York with this. If you were to be faced as a member of the Board of Commissioners with a land development project that you had personal objections to, but the project met the legal requirements, how would you handle working through that process as a member of a voting board?
I don't see having an objection to it as long as it met all the legal requirements and it was not having an adverse effect on the township as far as services, the tax base, and the overall quality of life.
And my second question, in your view, what is the difference between the role of a commissioner and that of the township manager?
Well, the township manager is responsible for day-to-day responsibility in the township. I assume all the department heads report directly to the township manager. The commissioner's role is looking at the bigger picture and not getting involved in the day-to-day management of the township.
Thank you.
I have another question. I'm going to piggyback on Commissioner Roth's question.
Sure.
A difficult decision was made by the board. I'm giving you that scenario. Residents are very unhappy. How do you, as a commissioner, handle that?
This is a recent decision?
Yes,
Okay.
a hypothetical decision, yeah.
My feeling is as long as we have given township residents the ability to come to meetings and voice their objections and adequately answer their questions, I feel like that we've fulfilled our responsibilities. I also understand, just like where I came from in my last two employers here in South Whitehall, that you can't please everybody all the time. And there's always going to be somebody that's going to be disappointed or doesn't get what they expected. And I think that's just part of the territory. But I think if you're addressing them in a professional manner and you're attempting to answer all the questions and concerns, as long as you're doing that, I think you're fulfilling your responsibilities.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, President Kelly. Mr. Sullivan, can I be informal, call you Jim?
Sure.
Okay, I met you a minute ago. Well, actually about 10 minutes ago, for a minute. So I just have two questions. First of all, thank you very much for the answers you provided. They actually seem to be very consistent with the role of commissioner. When you were on the planning board in New York, did you have interaction with commissioners or not? And if you did, could you briefly describe that interaction?
I'm going to say the majority of my interactions with the head of the county planning department, which we work with very closely. I was appointed by the county executive into the position, and we did have lots of interaction with the county executive, and also we had a county board of legislators, and we had lots of interaction with the board of legislators too.
Mm-hmm. How did that go when you needed to have that interaction?
I found everybody I dealt with in Orange County government very cooperative and very accommodating.
Thank you. My second question is, if you were selected, what would be your one or two priorities? Have you thought that far ahead or not?
Going back to the first couple comments I made, it would be looking at the long-term growth and development, both commercially and on the residential side for the township. Because as I said, I think that really drives everything else. And this township is growing. And I know there's been lots of controversy with some of the projects.
Thank you. If I just dig one layer deeper on that, what are your views on growth in South Whitehall Township? Have you formed any opinion yet?
Not exactly, but my main concern is that that the growth is managed, and that, for example, if there are upgrades and changes to infrastructure that have to be made, that the taxpayer doesn't necessarily support all of that the developer plays a role in funding some of that. So I would want to make sure that any development that has an impact on resources, services, or infrastructure is some of that burden and weight is carried by the developer themselves.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Sullivan, since the questions have gone towards growth, I had a question here in South Whitehall. There's been some discussion by residents that they would like to see us preserve more open space and farmland. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on that, both your experience in Orange County and then here, what you might have read or known about here in South Whitehall.
I'm aware of some tracts of land in the township have already been preserved for open space. That was an issue in Orange County, and I'm talking over 25 years ago it was an issue. Orange County was a very rural county, somewhat like parts of Lehigh County are right today and over the last 10 or 15 years. So we face the same problem with, when do you put a stop to development and when do you start designated open space? And although we didn't get directly involved with that unless the open space abutted a county road or a property, that was an issue that was always a topic of conversation for us. I firmly believe that there should be open space reserved in the township. And it's the same philosophy we had in Orange County, that we felt very deeply that there should be some space reserved.
And when you say open space, do you also put farmland in that same category?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Board questions?
I do have one more. What are your feelings about granting or denying waivers? If a developer brings in a lawful development, how do you feel about granting waivers or denying them?
I guess I'd have to see what the plus side for the township would be in granting the waiver. All right.
Okay.
I mean, I think there needs to be some kind of quid pro quo there, that if we're going to grant a waiver, there needs to be something else that we can get in return that would offset it or benefit the taxpayer or the township as a whole.
Thank you.
I'll add, I'm not a big fan of offering tax rebates and incentives open-ended, because in every situation that I'm aware of that I was involved with in New York, it never worked out. You know, granting tax waivers and exemptions without asking for something in return, to me, is very dangerous.
Commissioner Roth?
Yes, I do have one question. It's based on something in your resume. You put here that you were a former volunteer firefighter.
Mhm.
And as a commissioner, we certainly work closely with 3 volunteer fire companies here in South Whitehall Township. How might that experience as a volunteer firefighter help you in this role? And are there any specific ways in which you'd like to help our volunteer fire departments?
When I was volunteering in Peekskill, New York, it was a hybrid department. We had paid drivers who were unionized, and then all the other members were volunteers. We were a city of 55,000 people. We had 6 fire companies. We were the largest volunteer fire company in New York at the time. But we were very heavily dependent on state and city help and aid. You know, they underwrote the bonds for the vehicles that we were purchasing. We owned our own firehouses, but we were still heavily dependent on aid from both the city and the state to function and have the funds to maintain a vibrant fire department. So I understand how that works. I understand the importance of volunteer departments getting some support from municipalities that they work in, because they won't survive without it.
I have another question for you. Are you aware, or is there any pressing concern that you're aware of in the township that you would like to work, if you were appointed commissioner, to improve? And if so, how would you specifically improve it?
I would say offhand, no, I'm not personally aware of anything. I mean, the biggest issue in my neighborhood right now is the price of garbage. But I also understand your hands were tied with that too.
So let's use that as an example. Given the decision to accept a bid, knowing that the community is clearly, there are members that are not happy with it, I would be included in that. As a commissioner, if you were sitting up here and that decision was made, how would you propose to help that situation for the community?
Well, I know that a lot of residents on social media are claiming they'd be better off if we opened it up to every carter and everybody picked their own carter, or that township take over the carting. And I can tell you my experience in New York, that doesn't work out very well. That I think the approach that you've taken here, most townships in this part of Pennsylvania, by contracting the work out, I think that's the right way to go about it. It's very expensive to run your own sanitation department. And you'll never receive you'll never receive anything back for it. It becomes a black hole. I think allowing individual citizens of the township to select their own carter, I think, could be problematic too. You're going to be adding more traffic, more vehicles on the roads. That means in any given development, you could have 10 carters going in there on any day of the week to pick up trash. And I don't think that's a viable solution either. So I guess to answer your question, I would explain that to somebody who was upset. And I've already explained that to one of my neighbors. Like, it sounds great to pick your own, or it sounds great to have the township take it over, but are you really willing to sacrifice that level of service?
Thank you. Osborne? I don't have any other questions. Tom, did you have anything to add?
Just a procedural couple of questions. If you were to be appointed, would you be willing to take the oath of office as well as to file a statement of financial interest form?
Yes.
Thank you.
That concludes our interview time with you. Thank you very much for meeting with us
Very good.
tonight. And we will be back in touch whether or not the board has two options. One would be to consider an appointment this evening, and if we do not do that tonight, we will be convening the vacancy board by the 14th of January, and we'll be in touch with you.
Okay, very good.
Notify you.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very
Have a
much
good
for your
evening.
time. It was nice to meet you. Not here yet? Okay. Take a
I was just in the car waiting for 6:50.
Mr. Ahmad, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. We appreciate your interest in the vacant commissioner position. Before we open it up to the board for questions, I would give you a moment to introduce yourself to the board and just give us a little glimpse of why you're interested in the vacancy for commissioner.
So first of all, thank you for the opportunity. I applied last week, and reason for applying, I'll get into it. I basically, by profession, am a management consultant. I own my project management consulting firm, and been doing that for about 2 decades now. I've been in the profession of working with different organizations, whether it's companies or nonprofits or so on, or estates or state offices, and kind of helping them complete their work projects successfully. How they go about it, what do they need to do to make it done correctly, and complete it successfully. That's what I do on the professional side. I've been in Allentown on a personal level, I've been in Allentown for about a decade. Before that, around different suburbs of state of Pennsylvania. Uh, and the reason for the interest is just want to give back to the community. I know it's a very cliche answer, but just want knowing the skill set I bring to the table. I thought this would be a good place where I can sort of help the community and the township to sort of, help out with different projects and things like that. And sort of, I've been working for a few months with one of the other groups for the Civil Services Commission. Um, and so I kind of like my township a lot, and met with great people here. So just kind of trying to do what I think should be my responsibility as a citizen as well.
Very nice. Thank you. And thank you for your service as an alternate on the civil service. We appreciate your volunteering at your service. Just one follow-up question. You mentioned you've been in Allentown for a decade. Have you lived in South Whitehall for that decade or?
Yeah, I have been here since 2014 around 14, 15. And since then I've been here, and left for a year in between for Chicago for work assignment, but I was kind of traveling back and forth. And before that, for last 17 years, before that I was in just different, since 15 I've been pretty much in South.
And over the last 10 years, aside from your work here with civil service, have you had any other volunteer opportunities?
No, just because I was traveling a lot. Okay. So it was only during COVID time that the understanding of not needing to have people travel was, there. So I think it kind of, the silver lining for me was that I didn't have to travel so much. And that's exactly where afterwards I was able to sort of be able to give my, time other places.
Very nice. Thank you. I'm going to open it up to the board for any questions. Commissioner Roth?
Sure. I have 2 questions to start. The first is, in your view and with your experience in project management, as a commissioner candidate, in your view, what is the difference between the role of a commissioner and the role of our township manager?
Oh, good point. Um, I would know about the commissioner role a lot more later on, I'm guessing, but I think my understanding would be in terms of what I've seen so far in townships, right? I've been worked with this township in the capacity with the Board of Commissioners, of course. So I'm not well aware of the kind of projects that you would get here, and how they go compared to some other work that happens around. So I wouldn't be able to uh, weigh in on that at this point. But I do understand that there are going to be roles defined within them. My understanding is, right, that within the board, there are going to be roles defined, like in any group there would be. So I think it depends on that role where I would be able to sort of say, all right, what my difference would be in terms of what I can bring rather than, if I were a township manager or something else. So I don't know if it answers it directly, but it just kind of at that point it depends on what we have on table versus what my role is to sort of weigh in on that more.
Absolutely. Thank you. My second question, before let the other commissioners ask their questions, is you have been on the Civil Service Commission now for a little bit of time.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, as a potential commissioner, are there any initiatives or projects that you would like to either work with our police department on, or ways you think we could improve either our hiring process for police officers or the department in general?
Good question, actually. I think one of the challenges that I have seen over the last, I think 6 months that I've been with the civil services is the challenge, and it's a more of a national challenge at this point. But our township has also seen that with our police department is the recruitment, right? So at this point, they don't have so much issue with the retention, but yes, the recruitment and potential candidates, it has been a challenge, and while it is a more of at a national level, but of course, being a part of township, I think one of the important thing we have to do, and I think the chief and his team is doing a great job with it. People like myself have become involved because of what I have seen the police department doing and the chief doing in terms of just different programs they run and how they conduct themselves. I think that uh, perception, that optics have to be the outreach for it has to be done more. It is important for all the citizens. And I work with my local HOA, and I see the perception of the police is, it's better for some people, but at the end of it, it's not where it should be considering the police department we are part of, right? So I think that has to be done better. I think that has to be, and there should be things that I know Upper Mackenzie Township does a better job in terms of how things that they do and how they reach out to not just within their own township, but how the outreach and their marketing is done in a better, bigger scale. Because at the end of it, they don't just want their citizens and their township people to think that these are policemen, they're you know one of us, they're here to help us out. The outreach has to be bigger than that, and I think we should do things that are able to generate that positive message towards everyone, especially towards kids, younger people, kids who are going to school and high school. um, I have been myself advocating a lot of youngsters that I meet with for mentorship or for different things, and I see that this is not an option they think about. And when you tell them that, why are you not thinking about criminal justice or a degree in such thing and becoming, and that's something that they haven't thought about. Why, right? And you think about it because maybe they haven't seen enough signs out there that tells them that this is a good thing to do as well. So I think there are definitely things that the township and the commission should do to help our police department with that. And I have no doubt that there's a lot that can be done, and that would really positively impact the respect and also the interest in people in terms of joining and sort of helping out I think it's kind of needed as well anyway.
Great answer. Thank you.
I have a few questions, if you don't mind. It's
Sure.
good to see you again. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I know you are a member of the Civil Service Committee. I was wondering if you attend any other meetings
If I attend their meetings,
and any other meetings in any other department.
I know I attended a couple of the what are they called? I don't remember the name of the meeting. Sergeant Jason covers it. The Crime Watch one, I think I attended that one. I attended the Citizens Academy session last year, and but otherwise I attend their Civil Services Commission's meeting.
Okay.
But yeah.
As a commissioner, what would your priority be as you make decisions?
Good question. I want to see, and I was going to ask you this question towards the end. I want to see what are the current challenges we have, right? What are the things that we have seen so far in terms of bottlenecks, or let's say just overall challenges that we have seen as a group, right? Whether we are looking at it from the commission point of view or whether as a citizens of this township. I think it's important to see where is the help needed first. Those would be my ultimate things, right? The very first thing I would look at is, let's talk about the problem areas, the gaps, and how we can fill those up and then bridge those gaps and sort of complete those incomplete tasks. Or you can say where we, like we just talked about police department, right? Some issues, things like that, where we can really help out and where it's needed the most. Of course, there could be 7 areas, and then we prioritize them based on our resources, timeline, and things like that. But those would be the first areas. I wouldn't bring things from my perception or from my thought to begin with, because I want to see exactly what's on the table. What are some things that we really need help with, and so that would be my first goal. Of course, that I wouldn't know at this point. I would only know once I've become part of the team. But and then of course, looking at those open projects, or let's say open discussions, I would then prioritize them based on what works for us in terms of resources and timeline, our capability wise.
Great. And I do have one more question. Imagine that you are on the board. You have to make a decision,
Right.
and there's no consensus. How would you proceed?
Wow, difficult to put a generic scenario to it, but a good question. I would look at what is the priority there, right? So if it depends, right? So I am the only one making a decision, right? That's what you mentioned, right? So I would be the one making this.
Yeah.
I would look at what the issue in hand is. Like I said, at the end of it, again, like I said, it's easier to answer it if you have a specific example in front of me. But in a general sense of things, I would look at, and what I usually do is look at the priority of things. What is the outcome of it? What are we trying to achieve, and does it fulfill that? So at the end of it, the prioritization of the commission and what we are trying to do as a commission for the township, if it fulfills that, if it's something that is maybe not the best or most popular decision, but it helps us do our job and get our objectives or goals done, then I would prioritize that and go according to that. That means it's a yes, then it's a yes. If that means a no, then it's a no. But priority would be to always look at our objective and not deviate from that. Sometimes the things that come up and kind of sort of deviate from that, okay, 7 people are saying this, and we just have a strong consensus, and then you kind of sort of don't focus on exactly what you're supposed to do. So I would try to not do that and just make sure that the objective is in mind and kind of go towards that with the decision rather than away from it.
Okay. And how would you handle conflict between another commissioner in public?
You talk it out. That's what relationship management is going to be. That's what we have to talk about, right? Making them understand the same thing. What is the ultimate goal? Is it about my personal choice? It could be a decision that's against my personal choice, but as let's say, my professional responsibility at that point, I have to make that decision for the betterment of things. So that's what I would try to convey to the other commissioner, other members, and there would be stakeholders who would often object to a decision. There might be maybe 20% at times, or maybe 80%. But the idea is that everybody has to understand the objective of things, and it's not about personal preference. It's about what we have to do, what we are, let's say, assigned to do as a commission, and if we are doing our job with that, then that's fine. That's the main thing. You will have some objection to things, and you just have to know how to handle it and build a relationship where people understand that's what our priority is. And in the longer scheme of things, it kind of pans out.
Thank you so much.
Commissioner Osborne?
Thank you, President Kelly. Mr. Ahmad, in your let me backtrack just a little bit. So Commissioner Hodges asked, I think, I'll paraphrase, and if I don't do this exactly, then then it's another question. But I think what she was trying to get at is there's not consensus in public up at the dais. How do you resolve that? And as I listened to your answer, you mentioned objectives. What is the real objective? Well, when you have 5 individual commissioners, the
Right.
objective of each individual commissioner could be different.
Yeah.
So how do you work that out in public? And I guess a corollary to that is, if you can't, in your mind, come to a consensus that you're comfortable with, are you comfortable with not siding with the majority of the board?
Yes. Answer the last one. Yes. I mean, if I don't think, I wouldn't necessarily, it all depends on the topic, right? So it's difficult for me to say that, yes, if I do not have a, let's say, a decision, right? If I don't have a yes or no, then I would go with the majority. I think I, in a, if we look at it as in totality, as part of a commission, right? So if we have, I'm a part of those 5 people, the understanding should be that, okay, if we are trying to achieve something and if I do not have a yes or no to this vote, then you're asking whether I would just go with the majority of what we are deciding, right? In that situation.
Mm, Go ahead, answer in the way that you understand
Okay.
it.
If that's the situation, it depends. It's difficult for me, and I don't think it would be fair to say that yes all the time. I would just say no or yes to it. It all depends on the topic of it, what we are trying to achieve. But in a situation where there, from what I was trying understood your first question, in case even within our commission we don't have the consensus, then yeah, the idea is the same. What we talked about in having that relationship or that understanding within as well, that fine, you could say A, I could say B, C, D, and E, right? And in that situation, I have what I think is should be done. If I have to make a decision about it, and that has to be the sole purpose, I have to bring in what I believe is the right thing to do. That's what you are asking me to do when you, let's say, bring me to the team. Your objective is that, okay, a deal will come and he will bring his skill set and knowledge or experience or whatnot. So I have to, at the end of it, go according to that. In a situation where it aligns with the majority, great. If it doesn't align with the majority, that's fine. It is what it is. The majority will have their vote, I guess. But that's how I would go about it. And I don't know if that's exactly, if I'm able to answer the question correctly. Please do help me, elaborate on more if you want. You think I was understanding it correctly?
No, I think my question was clear, and I think your answer is you're comfortable with answering it.
all right.
So we only have a couple more minutes, so maybe just 1 minute
Sure.
on this question. So your resume is you're very qualified and experienced in project management. How would that very technical field translate to you being an effective commissioner?
Decision-making ability, stakeholder management, things like that. Uh, Project management is a technical field. I have worked in a very diverse way. So if you look at my resume, I haven't worked with a lot of people who come into project management. Some come from an IT background, some come from finance. I have worked from anywhere between finance, IT, public sector, private sector, health services, human services, things like that. So my experience has been the common factor between my 20 years of professional experience has been project management. Good 30% of it is always, as I coach people in my profession, is relationship management. 30% is problem solving. That's literally the 60% of project management or solutions. So those 60% would come in very handy. I believe you in any role you have to understand and have that empathy of the audience and your team, understand what their role is, what they are trying to achieve, and who are you serving, and what is being, what is trying to be, what is the solution everybody is trying to achieve. I bring that sort of understanding into it, and just that problem solving, approach is I think would be instrumental in how I would handle things.
Thank you.
I was trying to rush my answer. I know you said we only had a couple of
I
minutes.
do have one more question, Mr. Ahmad, and I'd just like to give you the opportunity,
Yep.
if you have any thoughts, to provide your perspective on the township's financial position, strengths you've identified, weaknesses you've identified, areas of improvement that you would like to focus on if you're selected for this position.
So again, I would come up to same thing. I think one of the things we have to do is our outreach in terms of the work we do has to be a little broader. I think from what I have talked to people, I don't think enough people understand the amount of work that goes into, goes in the back end of things. I think there is a need to sort of look into things like that we can sort of have that outreach towards our, residents. So it's important for people to know what we do, how we do things. It kind of impacts that relationship very strongly. I would like to look into that. And like I said, I would be very interested in understanding some of the main challenges that our commission is facing as of today, and really want to focus in sort of looking into how we can improve that. I don't have the outlook into the financial situation, and I haven't looked into it thoroughly, so I wouldn't like to comment on that yet, though. But if that's one of the challenges we are facing, then fine, we look into that and things like that. But I think a couple of things that I have in mind would be, let's look at the challenges that are in hand, and how do we bring that sort of communication, I would say, or at least that relationship with the residents of the township, where it is really at a level where people are well aware of how much work goes into it, what is being done, and things like that. I think it's important. It's sometimes underlooked, but it kind of really helps out in a lot of aspects that the Township Commission would like to work on.
Thank you.
I have one last question. We're about out of time, but I want to piggyback off your last answer. You mentioned we should have a broader outreach. I know this board, we've worked to accommodate and use social media and Nixle message alerts. We hold public meetings. We have a website that's very active. We have Nextdoor, we have Facebook. We're attempting to engage with the community as much as we can. I'm curious if you have any thoughts or suggestions that you might bring if you were appointed to this position to expand the outreach. Is there something that you might suggest to look into as an initiative?
I think the things that in terms of events, maybe perhaps that we could do more. I know there's social media, but there's a lot of people who are not on social media. There's Nextdoor, and a lot of people don't know they have to sign up to it, and unless until they have really followed things, my focus would be how do we bring people to a level where they are aware of these things. So let's think about somebody who has had no idea that we are on Facebook. How are they getting to know about it? They're not on Facebook, so they don't know what we are doing on Facebook, right? So things like that. Excel is one of the example. A lot of people who come here for different programs, they get to know that, okay, there's, we can sign up for this, and there's that, things like that. I think, when I say outreach, I think there are things that we could do at I wouldn't say all of it would be based on the events, but our outreach in terms of how are we doing things where we have our education centers, like the schools that we have, right? How many things do we do where they are well aware of within our township that, things that we do? What are we doing to kind of spread that awareness within the students community? And I'm talking about all level of that, not just so that they know what we do, but also sort of to have that engagement with our youth, where they look at this as an aspect of what they can contribute to, where they can also do it. So things like that, do we have a presence in our, when their career fair is happening? Do we, does township go there to make sure that they are involved in some capacities? Things like that, any events that are happening, what is our engagement in that? And there's always a lot of things that we can look into, but I do think that despite having all these things, which are at par with what other townships would be doing as well, there's always potential of sort of having that unique selling point, that USP, right? In terms of reaching out and saying, all right, there's some gap there. We can reach out to our youth. You can reach out to this demographic or age bracket, and what can be done there and things like that. So I think I would start with looking into what we do for our youth, and schools, and of all, whether it's elementary or middle school and high school, what are we doing there to sort of spread the awareness of the work we do, and things like that. That would be one of the areas.
Very good. Thank you very much. That concludes our time with your interview. I thank you for meeting with us and for answering our questions. I'll ask our township manager, Tom, did you have anything to add?
The only question I have is procedural in nature. Would you be willing to fulfill the oath of office and to file a statement of financial interest form if appointed?
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Again, thank you for your time
Thank you
tonight.
so much.
And we'll be back.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much. Nice meeting you all.
Very good. Thank you very much. Yes, we will. Thank you for that. His first name is Adeel, Adeel. Last name is Ahmed, A-H-M-A-D. Manjeet Walla, W-A-L-L-A, last name. Last name is Walla, W-A-L-L-A.
Okay.
And the second one was James Sullivan. Very good, thank you. Oh. Good evening.
Good evening.
Welcome. And for the benefit of the audience and anyone online, we are interviewing Glenn Gwanowski. Am I saying that correctly?
Guanovsky, but that's close.
Very good, thank you. Welcome, and we thank you for your interest in the vacant position of Township Commissioner. Before we open it up to questions from the board, I'd like to give you a moment to introduce yourself and also please let us know why you're interested in this position.
Sure. Well, I've been a resident of South Whitehall Township for 23 years. My wife and I were fortunate enough to have raised our family in what I consider to be the best community in the Lehigh Valley. I retired about a year and a half ago. And for the first time, I've had the opportunity to do something like this. I provided a CV, and you can see through the course of my professional career, I've done a lot of things and I've been involved in a lot of things. And I feel that that's expertise that could be utilized and made an asset to this township and to the board. I also believe that, when we think about what's been going on in the past couple of years in our country, the fact that civility, professionalism has kind of been tossed out the window as people get into incredibly heated debates about anything and everything. And I'm a firm believer in that everyone here who offers themselves up for public service is doing it because they're trying to do what's best for their community. And everyone should be treated with civility and respect in that regard. And opportunities for disagreement sometimes lead then to the ability to reach compromises and really the best solutions. And I think that if I were to become a member of the board, that would be certainly a focus on the way I would conduct myself and try to maintain a level of professionalism, decorum that seems to be so often lost in the way politics happens these days.
Very good, thank you. I'll go ahead and open it up to the board for questions.
I do have a few questions. Thank you for being here with us this evening. My first question is, do you regularly attend meetings? And if so, which ones?
I've attended some meetings over the years, particularly now with the opportunity to go into Zoom. It makes it so much easier. But for the most part, I've only attended those meetings where I had some interest in the agenda items. And the last couple of years, pretty much Zooming in. And again, the interest sort of stems to some of the development projects that have been going on in the last couple of years, things that I thought had potentially an impact on my life here in the township.
Right. My next question is, while making decisions, what would your priority be as a commissioner?
Could you explain further in terms of?
Or say you're appointed as a commissioner, what would guide your decision making? What would be your priority as you make decisions for your community?
Well, depending on the situation, certainly in the context of looking at what we have available to us in terms of any legal documents or framework to make a decision, I would look at that. Certainly turn to the solicitor if some issues came up that has some legal impact to get that perspective, and ultimately look at what makes the best decision when one has to balance out whatever competing interests exist. I would look to my colleagues on the board, particularly those who have been doing this for a while, to get some insight into what might make sense in the context of maybe not a decision. There may be no good decisions or great decisions, but rather, through conversation, compromise, a decent or a good decision can be met. And I think in that regard, it really comes down to looking at the issue, looking at resources available to give guidance, and to talk with my fellow commissioners in the context of getting their perspective and insight. And that's what would ultimately guide my decision-making process.
Thank you.
I had one follow-up, just curious. You mentioned that you've watched a couple of Zoom meetings if there were projects that had an impact on your life in the township. Is there one that comes to mind that maybe you could share with us?
Well, there was the Parkview hotel motel sort of redevelopment project. I just live, 3 blocks from this township complex, and certainly that was a project I watched closely. And I was one of the neighbors that contributed to engaging legal counsel to ensure that, the commission had all the facts and information available to them. I was involved a little bit of zoning and development work back when I was counsel for Lehigh Valley Health Network. And, I recognize that, developers don't always, they present a picture that meets their needs and is sort of geared toward getting approval for their projects. And I appreciated watching that particular process play out. We were able to put out some additional facts and information, and the commission was kind enough to kind of look at the big picture and give as much time as necessary to flush everything else out, including a 2-hour colloquy by John Carrolley that one night, which brought back some interesting memories for me. But that was something that I was very much focused on, as well as a lot of the neighbors in our development.
Thank you. And just to piggyback off of that, is there a specific concern or area of work within the township that if you were appointed that you would want to see focused on for your own personal work?
Well, I think one thing that would be interesting, we've had a lot of development projects approved in the past couple of years, and we're seeing, construction going on all over the place. I always thought that it's important to look not just at new development proposals that come on the agenda, but to be able to kind of do a little bit of a look back. Okay, these development projects were approved. Now, 2-3 years down the road, they're up. I mean, how did they work out, in terms of both impact, positive, negative? It's a development that's, commercially leasing property. How much of that property is really leased? And really kind of get a sense as to, in a very dynamic environment that we're all living in, how in terms of a look back, kind of a prospect, how do things work out, based on what was presented, what was approved, and then ultimately when it was built, what happened. I think that's something that would be of interest to me as a commissioner, to help weigh in then as new projects come on the table and sort of look at the new dynamic that you're looking to approve those projects in.
Very good, thank you.
I'm going to return to the topic of development briefly before going on to another topic. Oftentimes when the township is reviewing a proposed land development, developers will request waivers of certain SALDO or subdivision land development ordinance requirements. As a board member, you'll be tasked with deciding whether or not to grant those waivers. What criteria would you look at, or what factors would you consider in deciding whether or not to grant those waivers? I know it's hard to such a general statement, but are there any big issues that you'd look at when making that decision?
I think in large measure, you look at what the requirements are and what the waiver entails as to what potentially could be a negative impact. I looked to the civil engineer, Scott Pickoff. I wanted to get a new briefing on stormwater management and drainage. But I think in large measure, you look very carefully at what the waiver and that's being proposed, what impact it has, the rule in place that the waivers being requested from, why is that rule in place? And ultimately, is there a significant negative impact if that waiver were granted to the surrounding community?
Thank you. And my second question, I'd just like to give you the opportunity to comment if you have any thoughts on the township's current financial position, any strengths, weaknesses, areas for improvement, areas where you'd like to learn more, or make any improvements with respect to township finances.
Well, I think most part as a taxpayer for the past 23 years, I felt that the township did a nice job of managing finances. And I really don't have anything that raises a concern in my head or I'm critical about. I think individuals who have been serving on the commission for the past 23 years have done a very good job of sort of balancing out the township needs. And I think the township's better than it was 23 years ago. So, taxes haven't killed me. And I look around and I see the improvements. I mean, I love the parks. It's just so much available within, a 5-minute drive from my home in the context of, what's available in terms of just quality of life. So I think, frankly, I think an outstanding job has been done.
Thank you.
Commissioner Osborne?
Thank you, President Kelly. Mr. Kornowski, it's good to see you in a suit. I typically see you in the neighborhood, early in the morning.
Walking the dog.
Yeah. So, and also I can share with everyone, I know I served on a panel, let's say, committee maybe with Mr. Kornowski that President Judge Riemann called at the county level about homelessness. So I know that you're involved in that way in your capacity. But let me ask a couple questions, if I may. I mean, your resume, which I was not fully aware of course, I knew where you worked and, generally about your experience, but your experience is off the charts. I mean, you look at you call it a CV, resume. It's just unparalleled. How would you take your experience, though, and how would your experience translate for you being an effective commissioner, which is a totally different thing?
Well, I think my work experiences as a solicitor for the Lehigh Valley Health Network for 35 years put me in a lot of situations, a lot of complex issues, problems, a lot of meetings. Oftentimes, people would say, well, you're in house counsel, Glenn, you've got one client. I'd say, well, I don't have one client. I've got 15,000 clients, and they are usually at each other's throats. And sort of dealing with those issues and serving on various committees and things, I've come to appreciate the need for professionalism, decorum, courtesy, and to sort of work on developing consensus and making sure that every concern is heard, every voice, and to then look at ultimately trying to find the best outcome, the best decision that has to be made. I don't pretend to know everything, and certainly part of being sort of brand new in a role of commissioner, I would look to my colleagues who have, rich experience, and get some guidance from them initially, because I think that's sort of critical. But I do think within the context of the various things I've done, I have a lot of background experience in anything from personnel issues to some zoning and development. And I also have come to appreciate how critical it is to sort of work with people to try to find common ground, particularly when you have very strongly held opinions in opposition.
Thank you very much. And also, I'd like to congratulate you for being a Notre Dame Law School graduate. Go Irish.
Yes, and I'm also knitting line too, so I've got to have both sides of the.
Other commissioner questions? I have a question. If you were to be chosen to fulfill this 2-year vacancy, do you have one or two initiatives that you would focus on?
Again, what I expressed a few moments ago, I'm sort of curious in terms of seeing if we can't develop a concept of a look back sort of strategy in terms of the development projects that have been approved, and once they're sort of up and running, to see how they pan out. We have the development that was approved, what was represented. Did it actually work out the way it indicated it was going to work out? And that goes from everything from, sort of negative traffic impact to, if it's a commercial space being leased, how much of that space is really leased. Again, living in this community for so long, you look at all the building that's been done, especially if you go down Winchester, you hit Cedar Crest Boulevard, and all I see is a lot of open and available, space for rent. You wonder, okay, what is the real demand for that? And ultimately, every developer has a lot of hopes and dreams. It'd be interesting to see how that worked out. And that would be an initiative I'd be interested in exploring. So I think it would help give context then in terms of what's available in our township for commercial use and what needs to be added on to that commercial use.
And just as a follow-up to that, one of the issues that citizens have brought forth over the last several years was the matter of open space and preservation of farmland. Would you share with us your thoughts on either of those concepts?
I think green space is critical to well-being, and part of what makes this township great is the green space that exists. I mean, truth be told, when you put out your newsletters, you kind of show the covered bridge park. You don't show the beautiful office building being built at Cedar Crest and Walbert. I'm sure it'll look great when it's finished. Right now, it looks kind of hideous. I think my kids had a wonderful opportunity to grow in a community that was great for them in terms of riding their bikes, the access to parks, fields. And I'd hate to see that go away. I really would. That said, development is also important, and, things move on. But I think within the context of things, you can strike that balance. But I do believe that green space preservation is critical, I think, for the quality of life for all of our residents and for residents to come.
Thank you. There are no other commissioner questions. Tom, did you have any follow-up before?
My only question is procedural in nature. If appointed, would you be willing to fulfill the oath of office requirement and to file a statement of financial interests?
Yes.
Thank you.
Excellent. Again, thank you very much for your time
Well, thank
and
you.
for our questions this evening, and we'll be back in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you. Break, yeah. 5-minute break. Thank you for your patience while we took a short break. We're going to continue our interviews for the benefit of those online. Our current applicant is Chris Peischel. Chris, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for your interest in serving the vacancy of commissioner. I'll give you a moment to please introduce yourself to us and tell us why you would like to be considered for this position.
So my name is Chris Peischel, and about 10 months ago or so, I was asked if I'd like to run for commissioner. And I said, no. I said, why would I want to run for commissioner? The board at the time was doing everything that I approved of, I guess you could say. They were heading in the right directions. Things were positive. Why would I want to upset the apple cart? Well, they said that Brad decided to step down. So I said, okay. I thought about it, talked to my family, and I said, okay, it's a different way to serve the township. So I threw my hat in the ring and ran in the primaries and then in the general. And it gives me that opportunity to serve the township in a different manner.
Excellent, thank you. Your resume, I want to thank you for your service to our country through the U.S. Navy, and also recognize that you have been a member of Greenwald's Fire Company for
A long time, 40 years.
40 years.
Yeah.
Thank you for your service to our community. I'll open it up to the board to begin with questions.
Thank you, Chris. I have two questions, each on a different topic. The first one, I've asked this question of other applicants as well. I'd like to give you the opportunity to talk about your views on the township's financial position. Any strengths that you see, weaknesses, past or present, or areas that you'd like to focus on if you were selected.
So the township finances are probably in the best shape they've been in decades, partially because audits haven't been done up until 2 years ago to find out where we actually were financially. Now that we have a grasp of where we are, what our balances are, et cetera, the financial stability of the township is definitely headed in the right direction. And as the taxpayers, that's positive. They want to see that where their money's going and how it's being spent. By doing the audits, that's the transparency that they're looking for. As for challenges, nobody wants to see a tax increase, right? So how can you work with the staff and make sure that the money's being spent appropriately and for projects that improve their quality of life? I think is the biggest challenge. And then obviously we talked about garbage, and garbage went up 60%. And how can we lessen that financial impact on families? I mentioned that, was there a way to use some of the fund balances to give people a discount if they pay on time the first of the year, or not the first of the year, the first quarterly payment, to help alleviate some of that. May not have been the best idea or great idea, but ideas need to be shared, whether people agree or not, but somehow to lessen that financial impact, I think, is the biggest challenge.
Thank you. And my second question, Commissioner Kelly mentioned your years of service to the Greenwald's Fire Company. Based on your experience, what are the greatest challenges facing the volunteer fire companies here in South Whitehall, and how would you add value in addressing those challenges if you were selected for this position?
So, interesting question. The first one is recruitment and retention, clearly. Getting people to volunteer and then keeping them. The challenges now of our litigious societies, you can't just say, I'm a volunteer, and you whitewash your responsibilities away. You have to have the training, you have to have the knowledge. So getting people involved and then keeping them and making sure they're well trained to handle whatever you may call, because we have done a great job to train our citizens. If you have a problem, you call 911. Doesn't matter what it is. But in 40 years, I've never been to a cat rescue class. But if your cat's stuck in a tree, they expect us to come and take care of it. And that goes for any issue that the residents may have. The second one is funding. How are you going to continue to pay for $1 million fire trucks? Just like everything else they're going. A simple pumper 8 years ago was $500,000. Now they're approaching $1 million. Ladder trucks, $1.5 million, and it's climbing. So how do you effectively fund the fire company, keeping the volunteers so they're not out at the street corners with boots and asking for donations and all those things that go with it, so that they can focus on training and response.
Thank you.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Sure.
I have a few questions for you as well. I'm going to give you a scenario. You're on the board, a decision must be made, and there's no consensus. How do you go forward with that?
So the first thing you look at is where's the commonality? So if there's no consensus, somewhere along the line, you look for where you can all agree on something and go from there. Then you look at what's the legal ramifications of decisions that are going to be made? Is it within the law so that you can lessen the exposure that the township has from lawsuits? But there's usually some place where you can start with a commonality agreement and then build on that.
Okay, thank you so much. I also would like to know, when you make your decisions, what priorities guide those decisions?
Well, the first is the legal priorities, right? Are we within the law or what we decide? Not that we make a decision and it goes to court and it gets overturned anyway. So the legality is the first thing. The second thing is, how does it affect the quality of life? How does that decision going to reflect on our township residents, positive or negative? And what is their input? What do they feel about the decision? Because as a board of 5, we represent roughly 20,000 people. There's got to be some feedback from the residents of their input. So how do they feel? What are they looking for? Is it legal? And then as a representative of the township residents, then we kind of have to take that into consideration.
Thank you so much.
Commissioner Osborne?
Thank you, President Kelly. Chris, good evening. How are you?
I'm good. And yourself?
Good, good.
One more meeting.
Wait, what? I'm
One
sorry.
more meeting.
One more meeting, yeah. Same here, actually.
No, I'm referring to you.
Oh,
I hope I have a lot more after this.
okay. Along with your application, you had 3 references, letters of recommendation. And it was notable to me, in your application. I'd like to ask a question, though, on one of the letters of recommendation. I won't say who it was from, but it's actually kind of addressed in a similar way in 2 different recommendations. So let me read a little bit, one sentence from one of the recommendations. I have observed Chris set aside personal opinions on numerous occasions to achieve the goals of the organization. So I wanted to ask you, Chris, can you give us an example of when you did that and maybe why you did that? Because it's an important trait.
Right. So my entire life, professional life, was wired to make decisions in a short amount of time. Mercy services, right? So your personal opinion, what you feel individually, gets put aside to deal with the situation at hand. So my belief may be different than what the person or the patient or whomever it may have been, but the outcome required me to set that aside to make sure that we achieved what we wanted to achieve. So for example, an individual needs to go to the hospital and doesn't want to go to the hospital. How do we encourage them to do that? Does that answer your question?
It does, yes, thank you. Yeah. And let me ask you, you have so much experience in terms of your volunteerism in the community and in different ways too. The position that you applied for is different. How do you see the role of a commissioner in your eyes?
So the commissioner takes the 50,000-foot view of the township. So we set the goals of where we want to head to. We pass those goals along to the township manager, who takes maybe a 15,000-foot view. So for example, use the budget. Commissioners decide we don't want a tax increase, pass it along to the township manager. He then takes that information and then sends it down to his department head, who maybe took a 5,000-foot view. said, hey, here's what the commissioners have given us. Here's what we're going to try to do. And then they get down into the weeds to figure out if it's possible to do what commissioners are trying to get to. So we provide, the commissioners provide the goal with a starting path, and then the manager and the staff continue along that path and address any hurdles that may come along, bring it back to the commissioners to see if we can work something out. Is there, maybe the manager comes back and says, I don't really think we can get a no tax increase budget. So then we sit down and we look at is what can we do without, or do we need everything, and go from there. But it's more of a giving the guidance to this township staff.
Thank you.
Chris, I have a question. If you were to be appointed for this 2-year term, are there any specific pressing concerns in the township or goals that you might have that you'd like to see addressed if you were to have this position?
So I think the pressing problem is to keep the quality of life. So came here when I was 4 years old. This is a long time ago, right? I grew up here, went through the system, had a wonderful childhood, and raised my kids here, and they're doing pretty good. And I think they had a wonderful life. If you ask me, I'll tell you. But I want their kids and my grandkids then to have that same opportunity. So making sure the quality of life for the next generation, including open space, right? Where can they go? Are the streets safe for them to go out and ride their bikes and come home when the street lights come on? Things like that. That's probably, one of the pressing things, is to make sure that quality of life stays for my kids and future generations. As you saw, I think I have a history degree, share with them the historical roots of our township and where we came from and how we grew to where we are today, which helps shine some light on where we should be in the future, in my opinion. So I think that's probably the biggest challenge or hurdle, is something that I'd be focused on, is to make sure that our legacy for our kids is the same as what I had the opportunity.
If you would expand a little bit on the historical roots comment you made. You had attended one of our workshops for the comp plan, and we were talking about the historical resources within the township. With your experience being a lifelong resident here, and I recall you made some comments, it seems like you love history. Is there one or two examples you can give us of some initiatives you might like to see the township embark on?
Oh, absolutely. So the Troxel House, right? And first of all, it's spelled wrong. It's Trachsel is how they spelled it back in 1756. The Troxel House along the Jordan is the oldest residence in the county. Maybe there's one in Emmaus that'll challenge it. The Guth House, which is right next to Covered Bridge Park, is the longest continually occupied home in Lehigh County. Two fantastic historical structures from the 1750s are right here in the township. Add the bank barn at the Troxel House, which this building was modeled after, was built in 1806 by the grandkids of Peter Troxel, who founded the Troxel House. So saving that for historical posterity for me is just that's important, to see where you came from and to see how things have changed over time. So there's a story of the Troxel House. When they were building it, there's Indians across the creek on the bluff. If you're familiar with I know you're familiar with the layout of the land. So the bluff looks over, and there was an old orchard there, and they were eating apples, watching them build the house. And they told how they had the rifles close by, and in case they decided to come down. But things like that, I think is important to pass on to the folks after us.
Excellent, thank you.
I do have one more question. It's a topic it's a concern for many residents and other applicants tonight. We've asked them similar questions. First, what's your overall view, whether it be what's happened in the last few years or where we should be going with respect to development? And specifically, when developers request saldo waivers for various projects, what criteria or things would you look at or think about when deciding whether or not to grant those waivers?
So the first is obviously what the law says. What can we and can't we not grant? If we follow saldo, then that's the blueprint that you can follow. So if they want to request a waiver that goes against saldo and it doesn't make sense to approve it, then you don't approve it. You need development. You want to keep the tax base expanding, but you want to do it at a reasonable and responsible way versus just throwing buildings and developments wherever you can find an open field. The comp plan addressed that, and now it's time to get down to the zoning ordinances to make sure that they are in line with the comp plan.
Thank you.
Any other? I will ask one other question. You've had significant service here in the township, decades on Public Safety Commission, as well as Emergency Management, Fire Company. You were with Water and Sewer Authority. So if you were to think back on all that you've learned, volunteering for all of those boards, how does that equip you to serve now in a very different role where you're actually governing and legislating?
So you have to understand there's everybody has a point of view. Everybody looks at a problem from a different way, and you need to understand it. So, for example, I think a challenge for me would be planners. So, like I said, I was wired in my professional, you see a problem, you address the problem, you fix the problem, and you move to the next problem. Planners kind of like to bring people in and look at it. Okay. But there comes a time where we need to make a decision. So how a different person or different group of people look at problems and seeing it from their point of view and understanding where they're coming from helps prepare for governing the township. So working with the fire company for 40 years and water and sewer, you see a whole lot of people in their different perspectives. And it's not that they're right or wrong, it's just a different perspective. And you got to be willing to have discussions and ask questions, not that it's personal, but why are you doing it this way? Or why do you need to do it that way? And get there and see what they're thinking versus just closing them out and saying that's not a good idea. Seeing it from other people's perspective will help me govern the township.
Thank you. If there are no follow-ups, Tom, did you have any final comments?
Yes, my question is procedural in nature. If you were appointed to the position, would you be willing to fulfill the oath of office requirement as well as file a statement of financial interests?
Sure. Taking the oath isn't an issue. If financial interest, you're asking me to pledge my fortune like they did for the declaration, I'm pretty sure it's not going to get you very far, but I would be willing to do that.
Yeah, absolutely not, but yeah.
Chris, thank you very much for meeting with us this evening and answering our questions. The board has two options. We have an option tonight to appoint someone, or there's a possibility we could defer to a vacancy board meeting before January 14th. Either way, the township will be in touch with you to advise you.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent, thank you.
Have a good night.
Where are we on our schedule?
Hey, how are you? Hey, how are you?
Good evening. Welcome.
Thank you.
This meeting is being broadcast virtually, so for the benefit of those online, we have candidate Jamal Ahmed before us this evening. Welcome.
Nice to see you all. I think I know everybody except Mr. Roth. I haven't met him before, but I've met everybody else before.
Very nice. Well, welcome. We thank you for your interest in the vacant commissioner position. I'm going to give you just a moment or two to please introduce yourself to the board, and please let us know why you're interested in the vacancy.
Sure. As you all know, my name is Jamal Ahmed. I'm a resident of South Whitehall for about 29 years now. I live in about 5 minutes from here, so in Penn's Crossing, 1769 Penn Crossing. And I've been, during the last 15, I retired about 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. Before that, I was working in Philadelphia as a vice president of internal audit for a big company called Day and Zimmerman. And I was their vice president of internal audit and the chief ethics and compliance officer. Then I was and my educational background is I have a master's in public administration, and I also have a master's in business administration. So I feel that my educational background, especially MPA, Master of Public Administration, which is about managing government organization, that plus my background in finance and accounting as a VP of internal audit, and my background in ethics and compliance. All these skills would add value to the township. Now that I'm retired, I have the time to do something for the town where I was living for the last 29 years. So it's not because of any other reason, not to use this position as a stepping stone for something, another political position. My goal is simply to use my skills and my education for the benefit of the township, which I love, which I'm proud to be resident of.
Very good. Thank you. I will open it up to the board for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Ahmed. I have two questions
Sure.
to get us started this evening. You mentioned in your cover letter your experience in finance, accounting, public administration, auditing. I'd like to give you the opportunity to speak to your views on the township's current financial position, any strengths or weaknesses that you see, and also any areas that you'd really like to look into and make improvements in if you were selected.
My specialty in finance and auditing is actually in internal controls, establishing system of checks and balance to prevent and detect fraud, to prevent and detect non-compliance. I think these two issues are important to the township. There has been a case of fraudulent experience and fraud experience in the township several years ago. So my experience would be my input that I can provide in looking at your work process, looking at your system of checks and balance. What can we do to improve it? What can we do to improve, for example, the fraud that happened before? What could we have done to prevent it? Have we corrected it adequately to prevent from such things from happening again? So that's my experience. And so I've been in addition to having an MPA, MBA, I'm also a certified internal auditor, CIA. I'm also a certified risk management specialist. So I have risk management as well as certification in internal audit. So I have all the skills that you would need for improving the financial controls within the township.
Thank you. And my second question before I turn it over to the other commissioners is, in your view, what is the difference between the role of a commissioner and the role of the township manager?
The commissioner's role is to set policies, establish guidelines, provide guidance, and to look at the overall, for example, what projects are being considered in the township, to make decisions based on considering two important things, considering the environmental concerns about those projects, as well as people's concern about the quality of life. Those are the kind of decisions the township board of commissioners should be making, and to ensure that we have adequate safe drinking water, to ensure that we have adequate infrastructure in the township, to ensure that we have an adequate police force to provide the safety of the township. And once those decisions are made, the township manager's role is to implement those decisions. Township manager is not a policy maker. Policy maker is the board. but township manager is the implementer of the decisions made by the board.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I do have a few questions for you.
Sure.
Thank you for being here this evening. I was just wondering if you regularly attend meetings. If so, which ones?
Well, I have attended meetings, many meetings. I think I've seen you here even before you were elected. I've attended many meetings in this the board. I have not attended some of the ones because I was traveling quite a bit in the last 5-6 months. So my traveling is over. So actually I took a lot of vacations this year with my family because because of COVID, we didn't take any vacations. So we took a lot of vacations this year. So actually we're at about several vacations. So that's the reason why I wasn't here. But I have been attending many meetings, and Diane have seen me here.
Great. What topics interested you most during those meetings?
Which topics interested? Well,
Mhm.
one of the topics that was of interest was discussions regarding the development of the project at Tillman. It's not Tillman, Cedar Crest and Walbert Avenue. There was a lot of discussion. That was very interesting. Then also discussions on the Park View. Those are the way discussions. And I have also attended discussions on some of the developers trying to develop hotels near Dorney Park. So I've had, I don't remember everything. These are some of the ones that I remember.
Okay. While making decisions, what priorities guide your decisions?
Priorities will be what is for the good for the residents of South Whitehall Township, for the betterment, what you'd add to their quality of life, which would add to the overall financial stability of the township. You don't want to approve projects that will drain those townships' budget. So financial stability, public safety, traffic congestions, other quality of life issues, environmental concerns, all of those issues would be important in making decisions.
Okay. And I have a scenario for you. Say you're on the board and you have to make a decision,
Sure.
but there's no consensus. Everyone has different opinions. How would you go forward?
My approach would be if I sincerely believe in something that I think is right, my goal would be to try to convince others to my way of thinking and explaining to them why I believe this is the right thing for the township. Because if I believe something is right, I owe it to the residents of the town and to other board members to tell them, to convince them why I think this is right. So that is, if I can't do that, I'm failing. So.
And my last question is your feelings about granting or denying waivers. If a development comes before you, it is lawful, but the developer is asking for waivers. What is going to guide your decision whether to grant them or deny them?
That would be again, what is in the best interest of the residents of that township, the residents of the township, and what is in the best interest for the financial stability of the township. So those are the important considerations. What is best in the interest of environmental concerns, in the interest of public safety concerns, and the interest of traffic problems for the township. You can establish a project, a development, but it caused so much traffic in the process that people are leaving the town. So,
Thank you so much.
yep.
Commissioner Osborne?
Yeah, thank you, President Kelly. Jamal, how are you this evening?
How are you? Good to see you.
Good to see you again.
Yeah.
I have a question about what your top 1 or 2 priorities would be. Now, you've spoken about your expertise
Okay.
in internal controls,
Right.
financial, and also you alluded to your interest in hearing the discussions about development. So would that be part of your 1 or 2 priorities, or do you have priorities beyond that?
This time, this was the kind of priority I would have, but as I work with the board, I will be aware of other issues. So it will depend on what other issues that are more important. So there will be other priorities. Is a dynamic list of priorities. Is a dynamic list. It changes It should change over time. It should be, as new information comes along, new priorities will be changed based on new situations, new information. So priorities will begin. Overall priority will be what is good for the residents of the township or of the township. What is good for important for the township administration. This will be the thing. So there is not the priority list will not be a fixed list. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other comments from the board? Go ahead. That's okay. No, that's all right. You can go. Okay. I'm sorry, I'm making my notes here. So my question is there a pressing concern that you're aware of, one single one? I know that Commissioner Osborne asked more for top priorities, but is there something that you've maybe observed? You've been a lifelong resident, 29 years, a long time.
Yeah, I think maybe it could be even 30, yeah.
That you would like to see the township focus on if you were appointed to a 2-year term?
Improving the roads and some of them, like as I drive around the township, I see some of the roads that need to be repaired. That could be one priority, some of the roads. And actually I did ask around what is the hot topic in the board right now. And I didn't get a clear answer. Before coming here, I did make some phone calls to people who are familiar with the board. I said, what are the hot topics in the township? Because since I missed some of the meetings, and I didn't hear any hot burning topic that's being discussed at this.
Very good. Thank you. Commissioner Roth?
Yes. You've walked us through your views on a lot of important township topics tonight, and I thank you for that.
Okay.
One final question for you. Are there any particular initiatives, projects, or improvements that you would like to suggest or work on with respect to any of our emergency services, police, volunteer fire companies, emergency medical services? Any issue that comes to mind that you want to focus on, or something you'd like to see any of those departments do to better themselves?
I'm familiar with the police department because I see them actually. I see them. I've interacted with them. I think the police department here is very professional. They're doing a good job because they're always there. We have that situation in my home where I have to call 911, and they were there right away. And so I don't have any specific things to say that this must be improved. And I've had other situations as being resident of the township for so many years. I've had other occasions to deal with various departments within the township, whether it is planting a tree or removing a tree or things like that. So I have no bad feelings from my interactions with the people in those departments.
Thank you.
Any other commissioner questions? Did you have anything to add before we close?
Yes, my question's procedural in nature. If appointed, would you be willing to fulfill the oath of office requirement as well as to file a statement of financial interest form?
Sure.
Thank you.
Very good. Mr. Ahmed, thank you for spending time with us this evening and answering the board's questions. Tonight, at the end of the meeting, we have 2 choices to make. We certainly have the opportunity to consider an appointment this evening. And if that is not the option of the board, we also have the option to have a vacancy board meeting before January 14th. One way or the other, we'll be in touch to advise you.
You'll be making a decision today, is that what you said?
We have that option, or the second option would be to have a vacancy meeting before January 14th.
Okay, sure. Nice,
So we will
nice seeing you all.
certainly
Thank
be in
you.
touch.
Nice meeting you, and thank you. Nice meeting you.
Thank you very
Thank
much
you.
for your
Thank
time.
you.
Have a good evening.
Okay.
Please have a seat.
Okay.
Good evening.
Good evening.
For the purpose of the virtual meeting, we've got people online. We're currently going to interview Jeff Kemmerer. Welcome.
Thank you.
I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome you. Thank you for your interest in the vacant position. And I'd like to give you just a couple of moments to briefly introduce yourself and let us know why you're interested in this position.
Okay, well, I'm Jeff Kemmerer. As my cover letter said, I'm a lifetime resident of the township. Spend a lot of time involved in emergency services, including chief officer, fire chief at Woodlawn for 15 years. Involved with the Public Safety Commission back in the formative years. And I was promoted, and that job involved a lot of travel, international travel too. So I've kind of pulled away from the fire department and spent the second half of my career, I guess, going to a lot of places, meeting a lot of people, and doing business in a lot of places. So that's kind of affected my outlook on people and on life in general. I've since retired, and actually COVID kind of put a clamp on the travel. So I again joined the fire department. I'm currently treasurer and chief operating officer of Woodlawn. And well, that's about how I got here. Why I'm interested, it's actually I've had a couple discussions with people, old friends that I've reconnected with. And I've had the discussion 3 times in the past couple months, how South Whitehall Township is really a great place to live. And I've been to many places, many very nice places, and I haven't seen one place I would rather live than here in South Whitehall. That doesn't happen by accident. That's the result of a lot of hard work by a lot of talented people. And I guess my willingness to come on the board is to kind of support that effort and pay back a little bit to make sure that somebody 10 years from now can say the exact same thing.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And thank you for your many years of service with the local fire department, Woodlawn, for serving your community also as a role of fire chief. Thank you. I will open it up to the board for questions at this time.
I'll start with a question. I want to thank you for your over 30 years of service as a member of one of our volunteer fire companies here in South Whitehall. I'd like to ask you, what do you believe to be the greatest challenge or set of challenges facing the volunteer fire companies in South Whitehall? And what solutions would you propose to help address those challenges as a member of the board?
How much time do we have?
Yeah.
The township is certainly growing, and the expectations of the fire department are changing. Speaking for just Woodlawn, we will approach 900 calls this year, and that is getting beyond volunteer people responding from home. So there have to be other ways to do that. I'm sure you've seen in many of the newspaper articles and things, dealing with volunteer fire departments is rather a delicate thing, because if some administration comes down with a heavy hand, suddenly there's a pile of gear sitting in the station and everybody resigns. So you certainly don't want to do that. But nonetheless, it has to be controlled and it has to be coordinated. In terms of biggest challenges, if you look around out here, there's very little in terms of fire protection. And we come out here a lot, and it's a long way out here. So that's one area that needs to be addressed, the geographic distribution of resources. And secondly is what we can do to get the routine calls, the endless automatic alarms, the EMS calls, the lift assists, and those sorts of things. Get them done well because they're important, but at the same time, not drag everybody out of bed or everybody away from their jobs or things like that to handle that. So I know Citronier is trying one way, Greenewaltz is looking at another way, we're looking at a third way. That all has to be pulled together and coordinated.
Additional questions, but I will let my fellow commissioners ask questions before I ask the rest of mine.
Commissioner Hodges?
Thank you for being here tonight.
Oh, you're
It's good
welcome.
to see you.
Thank you for staying this late. I'm sure it's been a long discussion.
I'm going to give you a scenario.
Okay.
You're on the board.
Mhm.
A decision has to be made, but each commissioner has a different point of view. There's no consensus. How would you handle that situation?
Well, certainly I would give it more than 5 seconds of thought, but giving it 5 seconds of thought, everybody has different reasons for not agreeing. And the idea is to make sure everybody understands why everybody disagrees and find common ground in that position. That's a monthly meeting at the fire company, if you will. And if a decision has to be made, well, it has to be made. And I'm sorry, you can't please everyone all the time. But at the same time, again, and one of the things I wanted to comment on was our long-range planning. Whatever decisions are made have to kind of key into that and be putting us in a direction of our long-term planning. So I'm sure given a half hour, I could come up with a better answer, but that's shooting from the hip.
When you make your decisions, what principles guide those decisions? What are your priorities when you make decisions? And what will be your priorities when you make decisions as a commissioner?
Boy, I'm glad my wife's not here. I'm an engineer by training, so I tend to be very logical, very cause and effect. But nonetheless, there's an emotional component to everybody. And while I get all the facts in order, it has to feel good. And what that is will differ from case to case. But I'm not a Mr. Spock who just is driven strictly by logic. But at the same time, it's very important to me to understand exactly what the issues are and particularly who are the winners and who are the losers, and coming to maybe a win-win kind of scenario.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Good evening. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
What do you see as the role of a commissioner in South Whitehall?
Well, there's the big long list of responsibilities. But over the years, I've had the pleasure of dealing with a number of the boards. I guess if I were to be honest, some were more pleasurable than others. But I think the most important thing the Board of Commissioners does is sets a tone for the government of the township, and that tone filters down through all the staff and everything else as to how the township is going to operate. And I think that's probably the most important intangible thing that the commissioners do, and set a tone for the government.
Commissioner Hodges asked what might be your priorities, your thought process in coming to a decision. But let me ask a different angle of priorities. Would you, if you're successful in your application, would you be coming into the position with priorities that you would like to see accomplished in the township?
I don't have any burning agenda. I mean, that I'm coming because I want to do this. That's certainly not the case. My, I guess, burning agenda is I want to keep a good thing going. And
Great.
that's really what I see. Certainly there will be opportunities present themselves normally on a monthly basis where I would decide one way or the other. But I guess I'm really impressed the planning documents. While they're a bit lengthy, I think they focus on the key things, and that is we want to develop, but we want to preserve too. And so So I was particularly pleased to see how that whole thing evolved and how we're going about keeping the township, preserving the good things here, and not just growing it, but improving it where it needs to be.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
I'll piggyback off of Commissioner Osborne's question, since you answered about the planning documents. We did adopt the comprehensive plan, which will be the blueprint for growth for the next 10 years. And it seems you've spent some time reviewing it. Thank you to our staff for preparing it. It's an excellent document. I'm interested in your vision. If you were appointed, how would you like to see that plan implemented? Are there certain parts of that plan that you would like to see us focus on?
I think I would like to see the preservation portion of it emphasized. The development portion of it, there will be other people emphasizing that for us. But in terms of preserving what we have, it's unique. It's a unique area in the county, in the state, and there are a whole lot of things that need to be preserved, and if they're not, they'll be gone forever. So without getting into specifics, and it was a lot, somebody put a lot of work into that document. It was really impressive. But just broad brush, that would be my recommendations.
Thank you very much.
I do have an additional question. As you know, when a land development project goes through the land development process and arrives at our board, oftentimes a project will comply with our SALDO, our subdivision and land development ordinance, but developers will request waivers from certain requirements. And it's up to the board to decide whether or not to grant those waivers. What criteria or things would you think about and consider when deciding whether or not to grant a waiver?
Well, first of all, I have a long sales experience, and the sales answer is, okay, well, we can give you this if you give us that. And the whole goal should be, I mean, it's not extortion or anything like that, but it's moving towards a win-win position. So a win for the contractor and a win for us. And the specifics of that would change on a case-to-case basis, but certainly I would be less inclined to grant exemptions to requirements that have a really good purpose and really protect the township. I would not be too very inclined to grant waivers on those.
Thank you.
Answer you. I will ask my final question. Just a second. In all of your years, you certainly have been very involved in the fire services, and I'm just curious, over time, have you attended any of our other meetings just as a resident out of interest, besides fire-related or emergency services related?
Well, short answer, yes. Longer answer, with the publication of all the commissioners' packets, the minutes, the agenda, and also YouTube channel that gives or the recording of the meetings. I've attended probably 3 or 4 of this year's meetings while walking the dogs around the park. So the answer to your question is yes. And just one more thing I wanted to comment. I'm sure in my current position at the fire department, there is a potential, at least for the perception, of conflicts of interest. And I will not allow that to happen. So if I have to leave the duties of the fire department behind, I'd be willing to do that.
Thank you for sharing that. Just a follow-up to the YouTube videos. Certainly one of the benefits of COVID to the township is the ability to have our meetings virtual, for people to attend in real time or to observe them later. We've certainly strived, this board has, to be as transparent as possible and provide avenue for citizens to participate. In your opinion and your viewpoint, being a longtime resident here, do you have any suggestions or initiatives you might like to see carried forth if you were appointed to expand our ability to connect with our residents beyond what we're doing? Or do you feel we're at a good place with connecting?
I think you're at a good place right now where, some people are not interested. A lot of people aren't interested unless it's their backyard we're talking about. So, but the information is there. It's readily accessible. It's in a very easy to read format. And so I think it's fine. Now, maybe some of the younger TikTok generation might have some other ideas. I have my own ideas on TikTok, but we'll keep those for later. But it's an ongoing thing. And one of the things I noticed in my long tenure at the fire department is people change and how people react to things change. And, speaking for the fire department, we have to change in response to that. And that's kind of a microcosm of what the township is seeing with different types of residents coming in and different concerns and things like that.
Thank you. If there are no other commissioner comments, Tom, did you have any comments to add?
My only question is procedural in nature. If appointed, would you be willing to fulfill the oath of office requirement and file a statement of financial interest form?
Certainly.
Okay, thank you.
Very good, Jeff. Thank you very much for your time this evening. The board we have two choices tonight. We have an option to consider appointment by resolution to fill the vacancy, or we have the option also to hold a vacancy board meeting before January 14th. In either case, we will be in touch to advise.
Okay. Well,
Very good.
despite the grilling, it was nice to see everybody and
Thank
look
you for your
forward to
time.
seeing you again.
Very good. Have a good evening.
Okay, you
Thank
too.
you very
Bye-bye.
much.
President Kelly, if this were football, your quarterback rating would be off the charts, over 100.
I had a good mentor. Thank you. Good evening. So this meeting is being live streamed for the benefit of those online. We are interviewing our final candidate this evening, Michael Pascal. I say it correctly. Thank you. Welcome, Michael. Thank you for your interest in the vacant commissioner position. And I'd like to begin by giving you just a moment or two to introduce yourself to the board and give us an idea of why you're interested in this position. Why would you start
learning.
again?
Sorry about that. Yes, father of three. Good ties with Parkland School District and with South Whitehall in general. Built a house here in 2003. Never thought I'd be moving back here, but I did. Been here 15 years and absolutely love it. Just for my resume, I have a history of service and helping people. And recently, I was elected this past summer to my homeowners association, composing 299 homes. And I felt I have made a difference, or at least now our association is friendly with everybody and we all get along and put some money back into the community, and we're not running a debt anymore. So I thought it could help. I saw it open. My wife's like, well, why don't you try it? I'm like, babe, we have 3 kids. So I don't know. I mean, for the most part, I'm friendly. I'm easy to get along with. I'm good at negotiating. I'm in real estate, so I negotiate with sides every day. Commercial real estate also, which is always a killer. And yeah, that's about it with me. I'm just service and good relations and friendly. And I just thought, well, vacancy, maybe I can help.
Very nice. Well, thank you for being here this evening.
Mhm.
I'm going to go ahead and open it up to the board for some questions.
Thank you. Thank you for your resume. It's quite extensive, and you have a great combination of different experiences. One, and I'll just make a comment on this before I ask a question, but I notice on the top of the second page, you're currently a den leader with Cub Scout Pac-12.
Pac-12.
I am, my brother and I are proud alums of both Pac-12 and Troop 12.
Oh, there you go.
And my father was my den leader when I was in the program. So I wanted to thank you for serving that great organization, and it's a special group.
Thank you.
Really
Yeah,
is.
it was, they said 1 year. I don't have to, when I'm 5 years in.
Yeah.
I'm loving
That's
it,
how it
and
is.
my son loves it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you know, you just can't beat the experiences
Right.
we've had.
My question, I did notice on your resume too, you have experience as a United States Capitol Police officer, a canine handler, and director of training. You obviously have experience in security, international security. Do you have any goals or priorities or initiatives you would like to see any of our emergency services provide here in South Whitehall, whether it be our police department or our emergency medical services or our volunteer fire companies? Anything you believe that they could add to their programs already to be more ingrained in the community?
So really great question. But I've had experience with emergency services, with fire, with police. I have a lot of friends that are active officers here. South Whitehall is top notch. Just everyone here is excellent. I would have to dig in a little more and speak with basically the leaders of each department and see what needs to be addressed and what doesn't. But I know just from my experience in law enforcement, my experience in canine, my experience in security, because I wanted to make a few extra bucks. South Whitehall is really top tier. They really do have everything. And I mean, even though it's 44 officers,
43, I believe.
43 officers, yeah. They're running a great program here. South Whitehall is a very safe community, and real estate wise, it's a premium to sell in South Whitehall. It's just, people want to live here. And part of that is the security that you guys have provided, that safety, and led by great people. So that makes it easier.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I do have other questions, but I will let my fellow commissioners ask their first questions before I do.
Well, I have a piggyback off of yours. One of the bullet points in your training and highlights was coordinating DARE with DEA for children in the community. Was that local?
Yes. We actually did it at First Presbyterian. So I coordinated with friends of mine from a very long time ago that happened to be in this area. They are active DEA agents, and they said, oh, we can do a helicopter landing. And this was during DARE. So it was actually for all the scout troops, not just Cub Scout Pac-12, to be invited to see
the helicopter landing, to see a $2 million camera on the front of the helicopter and see everything the DEA does. And then, a lot of questions were asked, a lot of pictures were taken. The kids loved it. And then it was, pamphlets, information. They got like flying wings, pencils, so on from the DEA. It was a really good event. We had a lot of fun. And we talked about doing it again this spring.
Very interesting. Thank you.
Yes.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, Commissioner.
No, I'm
Rogers.
Welcome. It's
Thank
good to see you here. I do have a few questions for you. I was wondering if you regularly attend any meetings in the township, and if so, which ones? What are you familiar with?
To be honest, I really haven't attended too many meetings in townships, but I have attended a lot of township meetings at other townships, and that just happened to be involved with my work, with basically getting approvals from the township, both construction-wise, commercial-wise, so on. So I am familiar with township meetings, but I really can't say the last time I've been to a South Whitehall Township meeting, but and with this position opening up, I promise if you give me the shot, I will be here much more.
How did you find out about the opening?
My wife.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
My wife, I found out about it the next day, but my wife finds out about everything ahead of time. So
Okay.
obviously, she's the boss and I'm, just along for the ride. So
I noticed in your training and highlights, you have well-versed and capable in mediating community conflict.
mhm.
I was wondering, should you be appointed and you need to reach a decision up here, and each commissioner has a different viewpoint and you can't come to a consensus, how would you mediate that? How would you come to a consensus?
So, sorry, I leave him back. I dealt with something very similar to this not too long ago, and it was obviously on a much smaller scale, in the community scale, where someone cut down a tree, and they weren't supposed to because half the tree belonged to the owner on the other side. That led to debates. Let's get attorneys involved. Let's do this. Let's do that. I'm like, how much are we spending on attorneys? $500 an hour. I'm like, for a tree? I'm like, let's just talk this out. And I got both neighbors to sit down and discuss everything. And that would be something here. If we are at an impasse, let's talk it out and see what the best resolution is. I'm not saying that's going to work, but I'm saying, let me at least hear your side and you hear my side, and then get everyone involved together, whether it's over coffee or a lunch, something like that, so we can at least understand where everyone's at and then where everyone wants to go with this project. Because it's kind of a broad question in a sense. I don't know if it's like a major deal or a little deal and everyone's just, but I always felt just let's talk, let's listen, and figure out what we can do to get this done.
Thank you. Thank
Yes.
you very much. I do have another question for you. It's about land development.
Mhm.
A lawful development comes before you, and the developer is requesting waivers. How would you go forward? How would you decide whether to grant or deny a waiver?
Obviously, I'd have to see it. I have to see where it is, what it's for, so on, to understand it better. Fortunately, this is kind of in my wheelhouse. I do understand development. I have done subdivisions before. I have worked with developers who are currently building in our community. So before I get a waiver, I just want to see, what the waiver is, what it's for. Then would it benefit the community and where we all feel it would.
If you are faced with a situation where you're working with a developer, would you be willing to not partake in?
Absolutely recuse myself, of course.
Yeah, okay.
Obviously,
Okay.
there's an interest. I'm getting picking at. No, yeah, of course.
Okay, good.
I will just be that guy over there saying, hey, guys, I brought coffee, I brought candy. Like, no, I would completely recuse myself from that situation if it was something in South Whitehall.
Great. And I also wanted to thank you for your service. Your resume is very extensive. Thank you for all you've done.
Thank you.
And I read this one with great interest. The Myrtle Siegfried and Michael Vigilante, the doctors Siegfried and Vigilante discussed.
Yes.
Are you their grandson?
I am the grandson.
Okay.
I am named after my grandfather, who was my world, and my grandmother was the first woman to graduate from George Washington University, the medical school. So at a time when they said women aren't allowed to go to medical school because they're not smart enough. And
He made history.
she graduated top of her class, and all the guys took cues from her.
Good for her. Good
So,
for her.
And now my daughter wants to be a doctor. which is awesome.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
And you are Joseph and Alina's son.
I
Is
am.
that correct? Okay, wonderful. I'm good with questions.
Commissioner Osborne?
Thank you. I do have two questions, actually three, but the first one is kind of lighthearted. So,
Okay.
I saw your resume, as we all did, and I'm looking at it, I'm thinking this is quite the variety of activities that you're involved in, and worthy ones too. The last bullet point, if I remember this right, speaks German.
Auf Deutsch bitte. Ja.
Yeah.
Ja.
Sprechen Sie Deutsch?
Ich studierte Deutsch vor 4 Jahren an die George Washington Universität.
You got me there.
Okay.
I exhausted my.
If you throw me in Germany, we won't get lost. That's the best I can carry a conversation, because my wife's like, you shouldn't say fluent. I'm like, I'm good. She's like, yeah, you speak like a 5th grader. I'm like, okay, well, good enough.
So why? How did you come across speaking good German?
So this actually goes to my grandparents. So Vigilante, my grandfather, were very Italian, very prideful Italians. My dad, Pascal, is Regent Pascali. It's very Italian, very Italian, very Italian. But my grandmother, Myrtle Siegfried, she's from Germantown, Pennsylvania. And she spoke German to me. And to honor the heritage, I learned the language so I could speak with her. It was just something we shared together, and it was just something I followed in college because I happened to be good at it, and it was sort of my guaranteed A. So that's how I got with German.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. I thought it would be an opportunity to get to know you a little bit as a person. So you have a lot of experiences, and you applied for this vacancy. What is your understanding of the role of commissioner?
Basically, my understanding is what I've seen on the website and what I've seen on, going to meetings. Obviously, you guys work to help make this community better. And I mean, obviously, that's heavy on your shoulders. And obviously, you guys are doing a great job. And no, I'm not trying to kiss your butt to get the job, but I'm very happy here, and so is my family. So again, any way I can help and be of service and help with relations with the community. I do know a lot of people in South Whitehall. We are active in the community, my wife especially. She was an AP English teacher, and now she's involved with Parkland Schools as much as she can because she cares about education, and that's why my kids are so smart, not because of me. But so, obviously just relations and service. I'm good at both. I'm good at reaching out to people. I'm good at talking to people. I take time to get to know everyone, because you just never know when that one person throws you a tremendous deal and no one else talks to them. So I give everyone a chance. And I think that's been beneficial in my career, and it's helped me.
Commissioner Hodges asked a question about development and specifically about waivers. If we take a step back from that and generalize the topic of development, you've been in the community, you're involved, you hear a lot. What are and you're in real estate, what is your perspective on the development pressure in South Whitehall?
This is a good question. I can go a lot of different ways with this. The first thing, what I hear most of, and this is just from parents, will there be enough room in Parkland High School for everybody? Or will you have to build a second high school? And that's really just a concern. I hear from students that Parkland High School is so packed, they don't even go to the lockers, they just carry their bags with everything in them. So no, I haven't witnessed it. It's just what they said. I was like, okay. And I hear from the students just because they're my neighbors. So they're just telling me, like, okay, because my kids are going to Parkland High School, but the resources Parkland has is incredible. So my concern with development is that there's room for all the kids as we continue to expand the development. I am not against development in any way, and I'd be lying if I said I was. But again, it comes back to that. It comes back to getting rid of waste and so on. And obviously there's a punch list of things to deal with. But my concern would just be mainly that it can be policed, it can be serviced. And what, aside from building a better tax base for the community, what else can it bring to the community? Because I know, yes, a lot of people want to live here, and I've had a home on the market for 60 minutes and I had 8 offers. So, people want to live here. There's no doubt about it. So new development is going to be big. Any new development.
Okay, thank you, Michael.
Yeah, thank you.
I have another question for you and potentially a second question building off of that. I'd like to give you the opportunity, if you have any thoughts or comments on the current state of township finances, any positives or negatives that you see, any areas where you would like to improve in terms of township finances. I'd like to give you the opportunity to speak on that before I proceed to my second question, which is related to.
So this is something I'd want to break down with you guys first so I understand it better, because I can look at it and say, well, here's what I see wrong with it. But if you tell me, like, it's sort of looking at it from the outside, I don't know exactly what I'm reading. I can read numbers and actually decent at that. So if it's broken down in a way that I understand. Now, here's my concern, but it's, again, doing the work so I understand what the concerns are and what the numbers are, as opposed to just blindly saying, well, no, Jacob, screw this up.
I appreciate that. And actually, so my second question builds off of that. You briefly mentioned in your opening statement, I believe, some of the financial challenges and improvements you've made as a member of your HOA governing body. If you could talk about that, what I assume, except for the Cedar Creek Farm community, what financial responsibilities does the HOA have? What problems were you faced with going into that position, and what have you done since?
I am so sorry to take up all of your time like this, because this is actually a long answer. I have lived in that community for 19 years. For 19 years, I've had problems with the HOA board, and they've been there since. I've absorbed tremendous abuse. They don't let you come to meetings until the very end, and if you're late by 1 minute, too bad, to voice your concerns. There was no transparency. That was the big thing. I wasn't able to see anything, wasn't able to see how money was spent, wasn't able to see our vendor contracts. So I didn't know how money was spent, but I know I'm paying every 6 months, no significant number, but I know 299 people are spending a lot of money. But anytime I ask about it, I'm told to shut up. Literally, shut up. I'm like, what? And then they said, do you want to go outside? I'm like, are you sure? We can. I'm calling the police. I'm like, what's going on here? All I wanted to do was some simple questions. So what happened was, and this was something, again, I don't have time for it. 3 kids, so on. I had a leak in my roof. Call the insurance company. My roof was damaged in a storm. Call the manager of our community. Don't worry, Mike, get it fixed. Insurance company has a check to me in a week. I call a friend of mine who's in roofing, got everything done really quick. I get a call from the homeowners association yelling at me for not submitting a mod form. I'm like, but the manager said. I'm like, they don't care what the manager said. I'm like, and they're yelling at me like I am a kid who just took the last cookie out of the jar and didn't tell anybody. I'm like, okay, that's it. Elections are coming up. I'm running. I know how they've done things in the past where they show up with 100 proxy votes because the community manager, that's what he did. And what I decided to do was I just went around to everyone, introduced myself. I knew a lot of people, and 80 people showed up at the meeting. And I ended up winning. And then it was who's going to be president. And it was between me and one other person. She just spent an hour and a half before the election yelling at everyone about we received some PennDOT money for selling some land, $162,000 for selling some land along 22 there. And we kept saying, well, do you have any plans for the money? No, we don't have any plans. Well, what are you going to do with the money? None of your business. Okay, well, it's community money. You're just curious. But I mean, yelling with forceful. So I became president, and I sort of pushed myself in that position to become president. And then I started looking at the numbers and asking to see vendor contracts. I got invoices. I'm like, these aren't contracts. They're like, yes, they are. Like, these are invoices. These aren't contracts. I want to see the scope of work just so I can understand what we're paying. Mike, these are contracts, monthly contract. They're invoices. If we took this to a district attorney, they would say the same thing. They're invoices. That's not a contract. So we're paying invoices ahead of schedule before they even do the work, just trusting them that they will. That was the first problem. The second problem was finding out what happens with all the money. Cedar Creek Farms is loaded with a lot of money, including that $162,000. And when I say that, just shy of $1 million. And I went to the financial manager, who was the one who yelled at me. I said, well, I need to get my name on the account. Why? The president? Bylaws say I have to be. So the president and treasurer, and I sit there, I notice we have $500,000 sitting in a 0.01% interest-bearing account. I said, why do we have that there? Just curious. You're not going to tell me what to do with my money. Okay. So, and the treasurer was right there. So she's like, and she was newly elected as well because the woman I ran against, she actually dropped out after there were some financial questions on where certain monies were. This, not the S word, just missing. That's all. So we ended up putting an interest-bearing account, rolling over every 7 months, making almost 5%. So we put the money to work. And then they submitted their resignations as their contract was up because they wanted more money. So we brought in a new group. We interviewed a bunch of different people. It was just people we knew we can work with. But in full transparency, the president and treasurer have to sign every check. There's not one signature on a check anymore. We have to sign it. We have to know why we're signing for it. So that was the first issue. But now we are actually making money, and everyone's like, well, you need to go after these people because they obviously liberated money. I said, how much are we going to spend to prove we're right? Like, are we going to get it back? They're running under LLCs. Like, we have a good base. We're doing well. Let's just keep doing well. And this is like the first time in the past 10 years, the dues for the homes have been lowered. Not major, but lowered. And as far as this $162,000, everyone was yelling at me, saying, oh, well, we got to do this and that and this. I said, nope, how about this? There's 299 homes. Let's give $500 back to everyone. That's $149,500. And then we're using the rest to do a pickleball court because everyone likes pickleball. Doesn't cost us a thing, but that's what we did. And we avoided the tax implications because of the pass-through taxation. But when I went and introduced myself to myself and the treasurer, we introduced ourselves to all the members of the community and we're handing them a $500 check. They're like, is this a scam? Like, are you here to rob me? I'm like, no. We sold the land. Here's the paperwork. This money is yours. So I think we definitely changed the tune. And as opposed to no one coming to the meetings, we have an average of 20 to 30 people at every meeting now. And they voice their concerns. So because I encourage, tell me what's wrong because I can't guess. If I could guess, I would have guessed the right 6 lotto numbers a long time ago. So tell me if there's an issue. Tell me what's wrong. If you have an issue, let's deal with it. So, and actually, we do have an issue in our community, and I've been working closely with South Whitehall Police, and they have been absolutely wonderful.
Thank you.
Yep. Sorry it was so long, but there was a lot. I tried to narrow it down a little bit. There was a lot.
An interesting story as well. Thank you.
Any other board questions? I just have one. If you were appointed to this role, it'd be a 2-year term. Can you share with us if you would have 1 or 2 priorities that you might like to focus on as a commissioner?
I'm obviously interested in education and I'm interested in safety. Those would be my 2 big ones. Parkland High School is absolutely the best. I've written letters of recommendation to GW for students graduating from Parkland. They ended up getting full scholarships, which I was just so excited for them. I'm like, oh, my letter must have been that good. No, they were actually that smart and that qualified to go. And I was just very impressed by that. And then obviously safety, security, so on, working with law enforcement and our emergency organizations just to help make everything better if I can.
Excellent. Thank you. There are no other questions. Tom, do you have anything to add?
If you were appointed, would you be able to fulfill the requirement of the oath of office and file a statement of financial interest form with the township?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Excellent. We have no other questions. Thank you very much for your time. You can turn it off. The board has 2 options this evening. We have a consideration to appoint someone to the vacancy tonight, or we may decide to convene the vacancy board before January 14th. Whichever route we choose, we will be in touch with you to advise. Thank you very much. It was nice to meet you. So at this time, the 8 applicants have been interviewed by the board, and we have 2 options under agenda item 4 for consideration. The first is consideration of a possible appointment for commissioner by resolution by this board. And the second option is scheduling of any meetings of the Board of Commissioners and vacancy board as required. I would certainly like to open this up to discussion of the board, given the volume of information shared with us this evening by each of the applicants. It was very insightful, a lot of information shared. I personally would tend to want to schedule the vacancy board meeting to give this board time to consider and digest the information that has been presented to us this evening. And we could hold a meeting before January 14th to come together to publicly deliberate and decide on a replacement. That I open it to the board for discussion.
Commissioner Kelly, I would agree with that approach. We've now sat through 8 interviews. We've heard from 8 residents of the community wishing to be appointed to this seat. I think each of them added value to this conversation. My personal preference is that I would like to give this a once over and to think about this some more and review all the notes that I took tonight and the materials we've received and both literally and proverbially sleep on this decision before it is made. So I would favor that approach. At our last meeting last week, I raised 2 concerns with potentially wrapping up this process before the end of the year. The first was to give applicants enough time to get their applications in. The second one was to ensure that when the final vote is taken, it included our commissioner-elect. And I believe first of all, with respect to my first concern, we received 9 applications. 1 candidate withdrew. That exceeded my expectations for such a short window of application period. That was the number of 9 is the number of candidates this board interviewed 2 years ago when there was a resignation, and certainly much more than the 2 applications the board received when I was appointed last year. And the second, obviously, if we were to go to the vacancy board, our commissioner-elect would get to participate in that discussion and offer his thoughts. And I look forward to hearing them and discussing that with him and involving him in this process. So I would agree. And if there's no objection from any other commissioner, I would recommend that we hold that meeting on Wednesday, January the 10th, which is the second Wednesday of the month. Typically would hold a workshop if needed. If all board members and the commissioner-elect are around that evening, as well as our vacancy board chair, Mr. David Torrey. If everyone's in agreement, that would be my preference. And I just want to thank you, Diane, for running a smooth interview process tonight. And it was really great to hear all the applicants.
Thank you for that compliment, but the compliment needs to go to our township manager and staff who facilitated gathering all of the applications and setting up a very well-structured interview process for us this evening. So thank you.
Thank you.
In a very short amount of time, may I add, I do agree that we can wait. It's been a really long night. Tom, would that date be the date we're going to convene? And is everybody okay with that date?
Mr. Torrey, you are available, correct? Right, so we would have to advertise that meeting for the vacancy board. I would use the morning call to get the advertisement done as soon as possible. And so it would not be a meeting of the Board of Commissioners per se. It would be a meeting of the vacancy board, which consists of the board and Mr. Torrey as the vacancy board chairperson. I would suggest you make the meeting at 6 o'clock. Yeah, and then there would be a separate agenda listed on the township website and so forth.
I will also like to add that I do feel that there was sufficient time for advertising. And just the fact that we got 9 applications, that's indicative to me that there was sufficient time, that people are paying attention, they're reading the news, they are listening to meetings, they're going to the website and gathering their information from there. So I do think that was an adequate amount of time, knowing that we have that 30 days and then an additional 15 days with the vacancy board. So we are on a time crunch, but I do feel that that it was enough time just by those 9 applications. So,
I
thank
would
you.
agree. We certainly did discuss this topic at both of our December regularly scheduled Board of Commissioner meetings. It was very widely covered by local media. And Tom, many thanks to you and staff for pushing this out on all of our social media outlets. And Nixel was very helpful as well to inform the residents. So I think the township did a very good job of dispersing this information as widely as we were able. So thank you.
Thank you. And I would suggest the board make a formal motion to schedule a meeting and that to reflect that you would like more time, consideration of the volume of the applications received to consider said applications.
I will make that motion unless there's any other comments before.
I'll second. Is there any further discussion?
I have one question. I am in favor of the motion. I kind of stood out alone in our last meeting on this topic. And, for that reason, I'm certainly in favor of this. But I do have a question. If this motion were to pass, do we know, is there another window of opportunity for additional applicants or not?
To answer your question plainly, sure, you could, but it would be another very limited window. From a practical standpoint, it would be very similar to the last process. So if you're going to have the advertisement of the special meeting for the vacancy board, that will have to get done next week sometime would be the goal with the morning call. And then if you tried to receive more applications, again, you have to meet the window of advertisement. So you're looking at next week. So you would maybe be gaining like maybe 4 or 5 days from a practical standpoint.
Well, I would I would leave that up to the board members who would be, sitting on the board at that time. But it's just the question that I had, anticipating someone might ask that question. So I won't participate in that decision, but I thought the question was, needed to be asked.
My only comment to that, Commissioner Osborne, and it's a good question. As I said earlier, my concern with not receiving enough applications was certainly met with the sheer volume that we got. And there's a second concern I would have with doing that is we want to be consistent. We provided the limited window with the pre-announced interview date for all the applicants that have already interviewed. And for all applicants who would like this position, I would like to be consistent. So
I would agree.
that's my only concern in the interest of consistency and giving equal treatment to all potential candidates. I wouldn't want to affect that if a candidate tonight, would have wished to amend their application and now can't, et cetera.
Right. So let me ask another follow-up question on this. If no more potential candidates would be afforded another narrow window, then would the meeting that you're anticipating, would it be a decision-making meeting based on the interviews tonight? And there's no, for instance, the vacancy board president and the incoming commissioner-elect didn't have an opportunity to ask questions. What does it look like going forward in that meeting? Are all questions answered?
I believe, and our solicitor isn't here, and maybe
Tom might be able to speak to that.
yeah.
I think procedurally you'd have to have it set up as the decision-making meeting that night. Otherwise, you'd have to essentially re-interview.
Right.
Which we would not have a window of opportunity to do that, right?
Right.
I would be very cautious in doing that with the public meeting requirements. Consider you'd have to literally do it next week. And then, so with the 14th deadline, the 10th would then in that scenario be viewed as the final opportunity for the vacancy board. And then if not, that night, it would go to the Court of Common Pleas.
Right. So that would be a decision-making night only for the vacancy board that night.
Correct.
Okay.
So we have a motion and a second. Is there any public comment on this motion? Hearing and seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Tom, do we need to table the consideration for the resolution of appointment?
Yes.
Okay, so I make a motion to table the consideration of possible appointment for commissioner by resolution. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item 5, courtesy of the floor, opportunity for any member of the public to address the board on any non-agenda items. Is there anyone present or online who would like to address the board this time? Hearing and seeing none, we have no executive session scheduled. I need a motion to adjourn.
Diane, before we do that,
Yes.
I know we recognized Commissioner Osborne at our last meeting for his years of service to the township, but I will say that tonight is actually his last meeting. And I just want to say that, in each of our meetings in a different way, whether we've agreed or disagreed, you've added value to the conversation. And tonight is no exception with these interviews. I thank you for your questions. I thank you for your service. And we can say that tonight is your last meeting.
It's official.
So thank you, Brad.
Yes, thank you,
Thank you.
Commissioner Osborne. We wish you the
Thank
best.
you. Is that a promise? It's my last meeting.
Never say never. Oh, we have a motion and a second.
So moved.
Motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. This meeting is adjourned. Happy New Year to all.